and good evening, everyone. And welcome to the webinar on equine acupressure for respiratory issues. So first to start with, for those who didn't attend any webinar here before, I ask you to mute you and turn the video off, and we use the chat function to communicate. So if during the talk there are any questions, you can put them into the chat box straight away. I will keep an eye on it. If it fits in, I will answer it straight away, and otherwise we will have time at the end to address any questions that come up. And so we start now. And basically we will have a look at the respiratory system in general, then how TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, views respiratory issues. And then we look at a few acupoints for respiratory problems and how to apply them. And then in the end, if there are any questions, we can go into them a bit deeper. So the respiratory system, just from the anatomical point of view, the air basically enters into the nostril, flows through the nasal passages, passes the larynx into the trachea, the windpipe, and then enters into the lung with the bronchi and the alveoli. And respiratory issues are very common health problems with horses, and with some studies it's basically the most common after musculoskeletal and lameness problems. And there are a few really interesting facts also on the capacity of the lung and the respiratory system, like the volume of it, of a horse having a weight of 500 kilos, approximately 40 to 55 liters, and around 90,000 liters of air flow through a horse's lungs every day. And when resting, a horse takes 8 to 16 breaths per minute, inhaling and exhaling 6 to 8 liters with each breath. And then also when running heavily, the breathing rate increases to 120 to 150 breaths per minute. So you can just imagine what large amount of air flows through the lungs and what consequences with this capacity it must have if there are any disturbances and disruptions. And indicators of respiratory issues are, for example, cough. And especially we often, I think, sometimes tend to, if there's just one cough, it was just one cough, but a sound horse shouldn't, a healthy horse shouldn't cough. Yellow, white and thick nasal discharge, shortness of breath, low energy level, labored breathing, wheezing, respiration, congested breathing, heaving chest, flared nostrils, swollen lymph nodes under the jaw, and elevated body temperature. So that's just a few of them. And at the next slide, we'll have a look at the causes of it. And there we see actually how our management plays a big role. So there's viruses, bacteria, allergens, irritants, parasites, and others. So there's quite a number of causes on top of it. So it's quite obvious how horses can be very susceptible to get any health problems in that area. And it's, as I said, the management and the prevention plays a very big role in avoiding health issues in that area. And the last session was about the immune system. And what we covered there, which is also associated very much with the lung, is a factor and also helps the respiratory system in general, and not only focused on the immune system. I mean, it's interconnected and overlaps there anyway. But all the points, the acupoints we covered in the last session, they are all also good points to work with for respiratory issues. Just for you to know. That's I intentionally chose different points today, so to don't have any duplicates. So you have a good set of points then to address respiratory problems. And as I said, management actually and prevention plays such a big part in it, apart from the acupressure and what we cover here, so that we keep the environment dust free, for example, and that the quality of the feed, the hay especially, is good. And I even, a while ago, I read an article about it was the treatment from Western conventional treatment, but they also had a closer look at how the owners also complied with the suggestions for the changes of the management environment. Like, I mean, the forms of bedding we use and things like that, that we don't muck out when the horses are in the stables and all these things. And they actually came to the conclusion that a very big factor is in the success of the treatment, how well the owners comply and actually implement those changes in management. So basically, prevention and keeping the environment as beneficial as possible to avoid any respiratory issues is crucial. I mean, there's things we cannot avoid, and environmental factors with pollution and everything play a big role these days as well. And the respiratory issues from a TCM perspective, I picked here some of the very common ones, and we'll have a look how TCM views them and what TCM says is happening there. And we start with an acute bronchitis, the acute cough with nasal discharge, basically. And in a TCM point of view, that means that the Wei Qi is not strong enough in the first place. For those who are attending the first time, like Qi is usually translated as life energy. And without Qi, and from a Chinese perspective, life is not possible. And Qi flows all through our body. But there are different types of Qi. So when Qi enters the body, it goes through different processes and forms different types of Qi. And the Wei Qi is defensive Qi, which is regulated by the lung and also covers the surface of the body of the horse. And it's basically the defense against external influences and also against external pathogenic factors. So with the acute cough, if the Wei Qi is weak, exogenous pathogenic factors get a chance to enter the body, like, for example, wind cold in TCM. And that then affects the flow of lung qi. And if lung qi cannot flow freely, a cough and is blocked, it rebels, and the result is that the horse starts coughing. Then a chronic cough in relation to the upper respiratory system. This type of cough is usually a result of problems in management, as I said before, like the environmental factors are causing the cough, or allergens, so that there's something the horse is allergic to. And from a TCM point of view, a chronic condition is usually a deficiency. TCM divides between deficiencies and excess conditions. And with chronic ones, it's generally a deficiency. So here we have a lung qi or a lung yin deficiency, usually. And that again affects the flow of lung qi through the body. And lung qi usually descends in the body, but then it's not able to descend. And so it basically stagnates and again causes coughing and other respiratory problems and indications. And with the RAO, COPD, there is often, apart from the lung, the spleen or the kidney involved. So as I said, the qi goes through certain processes within the body. And if the spleen is not able to transform and transport in relation to what is sent to the spleen from the lung qi will be affected by it. And that again can cause respiratory issues, which are not primarily a problem on the level of the lung, but on the level of the spleen. For those who attend the first time, when we speak of the lung or the spleen or the kidney or all the other organs in TCM, the term covers much more than the anatomical physiological structure that we usually refer to from a Western point of view. But we will have a quick look at that with the lung in a moment. But just to be aware, we just don't really have words in our language who absolutely replicate what the Chinese mean. So they are only close to it. And the kidney, if the kidney is involved, it's basically the lung sends qi to the kidney. And if the kidney is too weak to receive the qi from the lung, it sends it back to the lung, but it shouldn't be there. And that again causes problems in the lung, which then cause respiratory issues. And we just said, I first actually have a question. If anybody wants, what is the biggest organ? If anybody would like to, yeah. Thanks, Florence. It's the organ, because some people are surprised. It's usually often what is mentioned is the digestive tract. So it's the skin. And when we look at the lung and TCM, and we'll have a closer look at that in a moment. So the lung and TCM, there also belongs the skin and the coat to it. So when you then think the lung is the third biggest organ in the body, the skin the biggest, what a huge area. So it even makes sense. We had spoken in the immune system session about how the lung is so, why it's so important to strengthen the lung in relation to the immune system, because it's basically the first entrance point of qi and the connection point with all the other organs to the external environment and the internal environment. So, and then with that huge layer of skin, which basically is also the barrier of the body towards the external environment. And it's a bit of a repetition again with the immune system, but for those who are here the first time, the lung in a TCM point of view, it belongs to the element of metal, and it's the season of autumn. Like there are 5 elements in TCM, and there's always an organ pair and a meridian pair associated with the element, and in this case it's the lung and the large intestine. And to that belongs the emotion of grief and sadness. So also grief and sadness can cause respiratory issues. And I actually, on Tuesdays, I do the same webinar in German. And there was somebody on it yesterday, and she basically told she had a mare, and the mare lost the foal, and she since then developed a respiratory condition, a chronic one, in connection with the loss of the foal. And then the sensory orifice that belongs to it is the nose. So, and then we can, are there any questions at the moment before we move forward to the acupoints? Okay. So just for those who attend this webinar the first time, there are a few contraindications for working with acupressure points. So we do not apply when we start off with acupressure on infant mares because there are certain points that can cause abortion. Then also directly before or after feeding heart feed. Also, if there are sudden behavior changes, we want to make sure that there's no pain, no underlying physical condition that causes the change of behavior. And for emergencies, please call the vet. And also what we do here, like I now basically show you a number of acupoints that you can use for respiratory conditions. And these are points that are very commonly used for Western indications of respiratory health issues. But it is not the same as if you really get an individual TCM diagnosis by a TCM therapist, because only that can guarantee you that you will work with the most effective point. With the points we are looking at now, you cannot cause any harm, but you may just not work with the most efficient point in your case. Okay, we'll put that, Fiona, we look at that at the end. Yeah. So, and then also we have two basic point techniques that we would use when we start off. And one is the thumb technique, where we work with our thumb on a point, and that's most suited if you work on big muscles maybe, and you use the tip of the thumb on the point in a 45 to 90 degree angle. And as a guideline for the start, hold the point and count it slowly to 20, 30. But generally, it's actually about to develop a feeling, and so that you basically know when it's enough or that you should stay a bit longer. But just to start, if you need some guidelines, just start with 20, 30, maybe up to a minute, and then move on to the next point. And the other one, you can work with your index finger, and you put your middle finger on top of your index finger. And that's especially if you work on bony structures, maybe on the leg. And we usually, we never, it's very gentle work. So I usually start that I only basically put my fingers on the point. It's more holding instead of putting any pressure there. And then I work with the responses of the horse. So with some, you may want to apply a bit more pressure, and with others, very lightly. It's really, really enough, but it's always gentle work. So the first points, I have 2 points that are on the bladder meridian. And it's a repetition for those who attended the first day, but we just have a quick look at the flow again. The bladder meridian starts at bladder 1 at the inner canthus of the eye, moves over the head, between the ears, down on the neck, over the withers, then further along the back. And there are 2 branches here on the back, but the one that's important for us now is here, the upper one. And it moves forward, goes up here, and then further down. And it actually moves down here in the groove between the muscles, and further down caudolateral on down the leg over the hog. and all the way down, and it ends with bladder 67 on the coronary band. It's actually the meridian with the most points, and there are 12 major meridians. They are run on the surface of the body, and they run bilaterally. So there are 12 on this side, and there are 12 on the other side as well. And so we start with bladder 13. And bladder 13 you find here, and it's 3 soon lateral to the dorsal midline in the 8th intercostal space. So soon is a Chinese measurement, and it's taken on different body parts. So you can see here, this is 9 soon, 12 soon, 13 soon. And here we have, for example, 3 soon that you can easily take at the scapula, at the cranial and the caudal edge in the upper part of it. So, and then basically that distance here, you take and you from the dorsal midline, so the midline on the back, to the point would be 3 soon, this distance here. That's also quite often, that's usually approximately six fingers or a hand width. But again, it depends on the body. But that's just, it's also that it's a guideline, and it's about really also developing a feeling for where the point actually is, because generally there are small dips where or indentions where an acupoint is. So with practice, you usually develop a feeling and where the point actually is, and you can feel them, and you use the localization, the description as your guidance, but you then feel the point and even the flow of the meridian. So, and it's in the 8th intercostal space. So the horse has 18 ribs, apart from the Arabians, and so you basically then find your 8th one. But we have a look at how to find them in a minute. It's also, I have the Chinese indications here, just if there are any, also if there are TCM therapists here, it's not so relevant for you at the moment, but just as an additional information, it's the association point of the lung. We had looked at the association points, excuse me, in the first session, and the association points, that's actually the 12 points here on the back. And the association points are all related to one of the 12 major meridians and organs. So you can basically, and they are used for diagnosis, assessment, and treatment and session work. So you can, through them, you can basically influence the whole meridians and organ system, and you can also get information about the state of the meridian and organ system, if there are any balances and imbalances. So that's why they are quite important. But with the bladder 13, that's the one for the lung, we of course then can address problems on the level of the lung in an efficient way. And it also strengthens the lung qi and regulates wei qi and yin qi. So as I said, you can apply it for respiratory diseases like COPD, cough, also fever, and pain that is medial on the forelimbs. And that has a bit to do with the flow, with its connection again to the lung and the lung meridian, and the flow of the lung meridian, which basically runs down medial on the foreleg. But as we are addressing respiratory conditions today, it's basically a very effective point to work with. And I have a quick video for you to show you how to locate them. So it's usually directly behind the scapula. So, but to make sure that that's really the case, I was just explaining the soon there. And you basically go to the end of the rib cage and you find the last rib. And from there, you count backwards until you are in the eighth. And when you are there, you follow the flow of the rib until you fall into the point. So is that clear, or should I repeat that again? Because it's unfortunate. I have an issue here with it doesn't play the sound. And so I will also upload the video, and I will include the audio with the replay section. So you will have proper access to it there then. So, and we have another one on the bladder meridian. And we had spoken about the importance of the kidney, or the role of the kidney in the lung function earlier. So that is the association point for the kidney, but it's also a good point to address respiratory conditions. It's also, again, 3 soon. Here it is. It's 3 soon lateral to the dorsal midline between the second and the third lumbar vertebrae, and dorsal to the caudal border of the last rib. So here. And it's the association point for the kidney, tonifies kidney yin, supports the function of the kidney in relation to the water metabolism. That's just for, and again, especially for asthma, but then also as the kidney function for urogenital diseases and pain in the lumbosacral area. So also pain and back problems in that area, it's also a good point to work with. And here again. So you again find the last rib and the end of the rib cage. And from there, you go up in a straight line to locate them. And you go up into the straight line to the point that is again then 3 soon lateral to the dorsal midline. That's where you find it. But that's the best way to locate it if you really orientate and use the last rib to go further up onto the bladder meridian. So, and we have another one on the lung meridian. And as I mentioned, just the flow of the lung meridian starts at the chest and then moves down. It goes here inside, it flows down inside of the leg. You see it here again, over the carpus and down, and ends with lung 11. There are 11 points on the lung meridian, and it ends here on the coronary band. And the point we work with and have a look at is lung 9. So, and lung 9 is on the radial side of the carpus. That means the side that is towards the radius here. And at the connection between the radius and the os intermedium, and just cranial to the accessory carpal bone. So the accessory carpal bone is actually a good way to palpate to then find lung 9. And it's also a source point that is means it is connected to source chi, or source chi is very much accessible on these points. There is a source point on each meridian, And the source qi is qi that is stored in the kidneys, and is then through the triple heater distributed throughout the body, and to nourish the whole body and all organs. And if you want to strengthen source qi, then the source point is a good point to access it. It is also an earth point, and we had touched on it in the first session, that the 5 metals are used in Chinese medicine in very, very different ways. Some use them very much for diagnosis. I don't do that much, but I might use it when it comes to what is here an earth point. Like on each meridian, you have 5 metal points. So you would also have on that meridian now a wood point and a metal point and a water point. And you can then basically, with the way the elements are in relation to each other, how they control and create and support each other, you can make use then of these points. It's also a tonifying point, and it transforms flame and clears heat and moistens dryness. So, and quite clear, because it is on the long meridian. It's a point you can really use for any respiratory condition, but also for pain in the carpus. So that's as a local point. You can use any, apart from the other TCM indications, or also Western indications. If you have a problem in a certain area, you can always work with points that are in this area or close to that area. Because then usually through the flow also of the meridian, you basically address imbalances there. So because lung 9 obviously is then a good point to work if there's a problem on the carpus. But also it says there's chest pain, and that makes sense again when we look at the flow of the lung meridian, because it basically starts in the chest. So through the flow, you can exit it through lung 9. And then we have our last point. And we have now, for those who were here before, you haven't heard about the conception vessel yet. And we had spoken and touched on the major meridians. So that are the main channels that run through the body, the energetic channels from TCM point of view. But there is also 8 extraordinary vessels. They are also channels that run throughout the body, but there are only 2 of them that have their own acupoints. The others use the acupoints of the major meridians. But the 2 that have their own acupoints are the conception vessel and I just forgotten the English term. It comes back in a minute, I think. The governing vessel, excuse me. And the conception vessel starts between the anus and the genitals, and then runs all the way on the midline to the and just ends before the lower lip. And it's also called the Sea of Yin. we had spoken in the first session about the opposites with yin and yang, and basically the black and white symbol, and where the yin is in the yang, and they are totally dependent and interrelated and cannot exist without each other. And the opposite would be the governing vessel, which is the sea of yang, and basically runs over the back of the horse. It basically starts just above the anus and then runs all the way on the midline, just until the upper lip. And so they basically again are the yin and yang opposites. And if you have any, you can use them if you have any imbalances in that area. But it's also, I've included it not to confuse you even more, but there is just one point that's a very strong and efficient point for any respiratory issues. And I didn't want to leave that out. So, and that's conception vessel 17. And conception vessel 17 is at the level of the caudal border of the elbow on the ventral midline. We look at that in a moment. And it is the influential point for the respiratory system. So it's an important and very effective and strong point for any respiratory issues. I mean, it's also, again, very obvious a bit with the where it's located. And influential points is another group of acupuncture points. We had the association point there just at the start. And in the previous sessions, we also had the master points, and we had a look at the source point there with long 9. And so there are different groups of acupoints that refer to different aspects. So here with the master point, it would be anatomical regions. Here it would be more for certain functions, and this one, it's for the respiratory system. It also is, again, another group of acupoints, the alarm point for the pericardium. There again is there are 12 alarm points. They again refer to one of the 12 organs. And in assessment, for example, we would work with the association points, the one we had at the start that run across the back of the horse. And we would try to basically, as a therapist, assess via the association points where there is, on what meridian and organ there is an imbalance. But the association point only give us an indication. It can be both the meridian, so more just energetically, but it can also already be deeper in the body, so that the organ actually is affected. And if you come to the conclusion that there is an imbalance there, you might like to add and test the alarm point in addition, because the alarm point gives you a better indication whether there is a problem on a deeper level, on the organ level. So, and this is for the pericardium, and it also connects the pericardium with the lung, kidney, and the small intestine. So that again shows us a bit with the lung function together with the kidney, but also then the other functions and processes that happen inside the body, and it supports the diaphragm. So, and it's a good point to work with for respiratory issues, problems in the chest area, again, as a local point, and also anxiety and insufficient lactation. So, And it's actually quite an easy point to locate because you just orientate yourself at the elbow, and from the elbow you just move then to the ventral midline. And you can find this, it's usually very easy to feel. There's usually a dip, and that's where the point then actually is. But you just go here, go to the elbow, and then move forward to the ventral midline. So, and I'm through with my points, but I wanted to mention something else because it always comes up in when it is about point work, because I always emphasize that the work is really gentle, and there's often the question, what if there are resistances or if there are painful points? And the thing is, like, I'd rather would apply caution, because this is this webinar series, I've addressed it to horse owners, and of course there's things like trigger point therapy, and also in Chinese medicine there's points that are uncomfortable, painful, called anchi points. But yes, you may work with such points, but we wouldn't address and work on them with the finger techniques that I had shown at the start. So you would go more into where you work with your whole hands and to tuna massage techniques. So like at the with these techniques, you wouldn't really work on points that are painful, and you'd like to keep it comfortable for the horse and gentle. So, but if there are any questions, we can actually start going into them, and I look at Fiona's. Okay, I saw there was a question. Do you have a question in that context, Fiona? Or if Nikki is here, I think also anybody else who was here before and who has tried to work with the points or with the bladder meridian, what we've done before, you may like to share how it worked and for you, and what your experience was. Yes, yes, that was, I wasn't sure exactly what the question is, Fiona. If a horse had stomach ulcers and lung condition, this is indicative for lung and large intestine. My horse has these conditions chronic. Is your question whether it's indicative for lung and large intestine? Because I'm not exactly sure what your question is, but I see it. Yeah, okay, sorry. Well, the thing is, I actually cannot really say that for sure from a distance, because I would, for a proper TCM diagnosis, I would need to see your horse and even more put hand on the horse and feel for diagnostic points. So it's, of course, from the condition, it's quite likely. but I would really know, because with the lung condition, I cannot say from a distance whether it's only the lung, or if there's maybe even because it's chronic, it's even the spleen and or the kidney involved. And also with ulcers, they can be quite complex. So it's actually not possible from a TCM point of view, not possible to say from a distance. And Florence, I suppose you must work on the different points for several days. It depends. There's often the question about how often. And I think if you have an acute condition, you really may want maybe to work on it maybe every second day. It doesn't need to be every day. With the chronic ones, sometimes at the start you wouldn't necessarily do it every second day, but maybe every other day, once a week, until you get something moving, and then you can leave a bit more time in between. I always think you also it's energetic work. You don't need to overdo it, because when you treat them, you want to basically stimulate the body to to the body to that the body gets finds its own balance again. So, and I think we have to allow that to happen. And but with the work with these few points, you cannot also do much harm. So if you also want to include them in a grooming routine or something like that, that's absolutely fine. But as I said, it's kind of energetic work. You set impulses, and then I think you should give space to let the body do the work. Oh, I need to go down. Ah, Fiona, sorry, I have not seen that. So he has both these conditions, the lung and the ulcers. Do they relate to each other? They may, but again, I'm really cautious. I don't want to, because I don't know. I've not seen the horse. I've not put hands on the horse, so I don't really know. But there can be things that are related for him to. Okay, so wondering how long before seeing an improvement. That's again also it depends, because it's, I mean, ideally, it depending on the severity of the condition, ideally you have a TCM therapist working on your horse if you really have a major health condition, and also working with acupuncture, which is usually stronger, but then being able to continue to support your horse with the acupressure, and ideally on the basis of the individual diagnosis for your horse, so then you have the most effective point. Otherwise, it depends. As a support, it should be, you can actually see results very fairly quickly, but sometimes if it's very with chronic conditions, it can take a bit longer. I think with acute conditions, you actually see results very fast. And with chronic ones, I mean, they are chronic. So it's about basically achieving improvement. We won't be able usually to get rid of it, but to improve them as much as we can, to improve quality of life. But sometimes that can take a bit of time until the change really happens. Okay, Nikki says she has been working on the acupressure point on the front leg, next near the chestnut. That was also long, that's long 7, the point for the lung. Okay, watching his reactions is slow blinking, lip twitching. Yes, that's what you usually get for reactions. Yeah, yeah. So there can be all sorts of and some are more some horses are more expressive than others. So because I said for those who attend the first time, you work with the responses of the horse, and what Nikki says, like blinking and lip twitching, that can be things. And sometimes they really start to relax. You just see the relaxing, like the lowering of the head, and just going into the work and basically taking part in the work. And you can also get yawning. You sometimes, because we touched on the if they are a bit reactive on a point, what sometimes happens that they may be a bit fidgety. That's okay if you continue working there and go over basically that threshold a bit. But it's again a bit, it's practice. What can you do? What or what you should do or not. Fascinating to watch his reactions. It is very similar to reactions I have from horses during a Reiki healing treatment. Yes, that's true. The responses in acupressure work are very similar to what you would get in pure energy work. Mm, yeah. Are there any more questions also on how to work with the points, or mm, do you have online courses? I have a very short intro into traditional Chinese medicine. I'm working on it, but to basically get more extended material out there. But I think it will take a bit more time. So the introduction I have is very basic, but it gives you an overview on a very basic TCM theory. So to get an it it would give you it would give you some idea. And I'm working on getting more in-depth material. I'm just trying to figure out how to best do it, because I'm missing the hands-on work and practice and teaching, and I think it's very important. I'm always a bit afraid because I feel I don't know what you put out online or here. You really don't know what people make of it, and I think it's just the series fine, but I think there must be more video material or also guidance, so that you can be sure things are not misunderstood, but it's in progress. And I think soft tissue therapy and acupressure would work well together as well. um, I'll I put a note there. You have you get it on my website, but I'll send you an email, because then I sent you the link to it, and you can work and go on from there. Yeah. So, and you will I will send you a link with the replay for this one and the download for the parts of the presentation. But again, it's probably will be the weekend until I get it done. So Okay. If there are no more questions, I would say we'll wrap up here. And thanks for your time and your attention. And I see you next week. Bye bye.
I was dreaming of free.